Good morning, everybody. How we doing? This is Spectre here for another edition of Midnight Rider. As promised last night on the broadcast, I said I'd try and squeeze one in here today. Had some other material on that I wanted to cover. Today on the broadcast, I wanted to get into a couple things and effectively titled it Watch the Water plus Greensill and Evergreen Follow-Up. Lots going on in the waters as of late. Middle East to South China Sea. We're going to get into that. A little war stance related stuff. War drums beating. And of course, Greensill follow up from last night on the broadcast. And a little bit more on the Evergreen saga and where that thing is headed since it blocked the old Suez Canal here in the last week or so and eventually was freed. So we'll see you back here momentarily on the other side. Warning. These social media platforms may be hazardous to your health. Censorship kills. Pain coming. This has been a PSA by Breaking Spectre. Alright, welcome back everybody. Like I said, a little bit to get into here, so I'm just going to jump right in. And I'm going to follow up with where I left off last night in regards to Greensill, because this piece came through in the overnight hours right after broadcast, actually. So it's a good lead-in into what I covered last night. If you missed it, you can check it out back here on the channel. We'll have it up on the old backup channels. And of course, don't forget, thank you if you're tuning in on the YouTube, Twitch, DLive side, as well as our friends over at the Tiger Network. And of course, now we are also up over on Trovo and Vaughn Live. So if you're not familiar with those two platforms, check those out as well. But we'll have the archives up over on Gab TV and UGEtube here a little bit later on today from last night, and this one as well a little bit later. So, that being said, the fallout from Greensill collapse splatters British government as taxpayers face big losses. And if you remember right, I was talking last night that David Cameron was one of the major lobbyists who actually put together this sleaze bill and ultimately ensnared himself in it. And this carries that theme a little bit further here. It says Downing Street's dodgy dealings with Citigroup and Greensill show just how far the British government is willing to go to line the pockets of banks and other financial firms while bleeding taxpayers dry. And of course, this article comes by way of Naked Capitalism. The collapse of UK-based supply chain finance firm Greensill Capital continues to reverberate. In Germany, the Private Banking Association has paid out around 2.7 billion euros to more than 20,500 Greensill bank customers as part of its deposit guarantee scheme after the bank collapsed in early March. But the deposits of institutional investors, such as other financial institutions, investment firms, and local authorities, are not covered. 50 municipalities are believed to be nursing losses of at least 500 million euros. Greensill's biggest sources of funds, Credit Suisse, has seen its share price plunge by almost a quarter. This is due not only to the fallout from Greensill's collapse, but also the impact of losses at its prime brokerage division caused by the stricken U.S. hedge fund Archegos, which are expected to reach about 4 billion euros. The lender has warned of considerable uncertainty regarding the valuation of its supply chain finance fund. More than $5 billion of the roughly $10 billion invested in the fund remains outstanding. Credit Suisse had assured clients in marketing documents that the debt in the supply chain fund was quote-unquote low risk. In one fact sheet, it also said the underlying credit risk of the notes is fully insured by highly rated insurance companies. At the beginning of March, that turned out not to be true. Some clients whose money remains trapped in the fund have threatened to sue. Greensill's biggest client, Anglo-Indian steel magnate Sanjeev Gupta, is on the verge of bankruptcy. Gupta's GFG alliance reportedly owes Greensill more than €3 billion. It began defaulting on its obligations after Greensill stopped lending to the group at the beginning of March. At the end of March, Gupta requested a £170 million emergency loan from the UK government, which was duly rejected. Greensill's administrator, Grant Thornton, has been unable to verify invoices underpinning some of the loans to Gupta. Companies listed on the documents denied ever having done business with the metals magnate. Quite interesting. No sign of paperwork and no signs of actually doing business. Very, very interesting. Now the fallout is beginning to splatter the British government, which invited Greensill to participate in its Coronavirus Large Business Interruption Loan Scheme, CLBILS. This is despite the fact the company, A, wasn't a bank, and B, was quite clearly already deep in financial trouble. Greensill's participation in CLBILS allowed it to extend even more loans, this time government-backed, to Gupta's empire. Taxpayers will now probably end up holding the bag for those loans. So special treatment, frantic lobbying. The Greensill Capital was the only non-bank financial firm to administer the emergency coronavirus loan schemes. The Treasury has admitted that Greensill was exempt from the capital adequacy and stress tests that would safeguard the public from risk when using other lenders. The apparent reason for this special treatment was that former UK Prime Minister David Cameron, who had joined Greensill as an advisor in 2018, was frantically lobbying Chancellor of Exchequer Rishi Sunak to hand government loans to the embattled financial firm as it spiraled toward bankruptcy. Cameron is believed to have held share options in Greensill Capital worth tens of millions of pounds. Now they're worth nothing. And now it gets good here because now this is where it starts to tie in old Citigroup. Cameron's ties with Greensill's eponymous founder, Lex Greensill, date all the way back to 2011, when Cameron's then Cabinet Secretary, Jeremy Haywood, brought Greensill, then the head of Citi's supply chain finance division, into 10 Downing Street as a special advisor. Greensill was still on Citi's payroll when he joined the government. As an expose in the Sunday Times reveals, his brief was to convince ministers and senior civil servants to hire Citi to extend early payment to many of the government's biggest suppliers. Citigroup's pitch was to pay the state's suppliers in sectors where it apparently paid late, such as pharmacists awaiting NHS prescription fees. Maurice Thompson, the British boss of Citigroup, who would later become chairman of Greensill Capital's supervisory board, claimed this would help business owners, offering them an alternative to expensive loans, and the government. It would also be a smart investment for Citi, paying tens of billions of pounds in invoices on behalf of the most reliable of clients, the state, and taking a cut along the way. So let's just jump down here into some of the dodgy dealings. As a group of civil servants tried to thwart the plan, but Greensill enjoyed the backing of Haywood, Britain's most powerful civil servant at the time. Haywood gave Greensill his own team and access to his department he wished to address. He also made him a senior advisor and crown representative to Her Majesty's government on supply chain finance. And what really irked some civil servants was the ambiguity of Greensill's position. After Greensill had left Citibank months after joining Downing Street and set up his own supply chain finance firm, Greensill Capital, it was unclear whose interests he was advancing, his former employers, his own firms, or, as one would expect, the taxpayers. Even more dubious was the way in which the government assigned projects to Citi, and later Greensill Capital, reports the Sunday Times. So very, very interesting. And then happy camping with bin Salman. So now we start to tie up the folks in Saudi Arabia. Says as for Cameron himself, he joined Greensill as a special advisor in 2018, 2 years after leaving politics. In February 2020, he and Lex Greensill went on a camping holiday with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. little more than a year after bin Salman had arranged the murder of Washington Post and Middle East Eye columnist Jamal Khashoggi. The holiday appears to have reaped dividends. In June 2020, a senior Greensill Capital executive spoke publicly about the company's partnership with the Saudi Public Investment Fund, describing it as part of the family of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. According to most reports, Cameron did nothing wrong. Last week, he was cleared of breaking lobbying rules after it was concluded that as an employee of Greensill, he was not required to declare himself on the register of consultant lobbyists. But his already tarnished reputation is in tatters, and he could face an investigation. Cameron himself refuses to even respond to the lobbying allegations. His ear-splitting silence speaks volumes about the state of British politics today. So I find that to be quite interesting. Like I said, a little bit of a follow-up to what we saw last night on old David Cameron. And I find it interesting, too, on this latest bit of tying in old bin Salman out of Saudi Arabia. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with so bold a statement to say that they had arranged for the death of Jamal Khashoggi. I think that investigation is still ongoing since that whole deal transpired. But nonetheless, I think there's going to be a lot more yet to unfold as part of the old Greensill deal. And of course, it's tying up the old banksters like Credit Suisse and a number of these guys. And so it's going to get very, very interesting. So that being said, let's jump into the old Watch the Water section here, talking about the Italian tanker blocks traffic in Suez due to engine failure. This was yesterday morning. So we'll look at it from a financial perspective here. And of course, this just on the heels of little more than a week ago of finally getting the Evergreen container ship finally broken free after 5 or 6 days of sitting cattywampus in the old canal. Update, as of 8 Eastern yesterday, says 6 ships that had been stuck behind the Rumford have started to move as this morning's latest traffic trouble in the Suez dissipates. The first vessel, Aframax crude tanker Minerva Nike, heading north through the canal at roughly 12 knots at around noon London time. The Rumford, meanwhile, has entered the Great Bitter Lake. There we go. So it was updated again around 7, says the Italian tanker is now operational and just resumed the Suez Canal transit. The northbound convoy flow is back to normal, according to an emailed note from Inchcape Shipping Services obtained by Bloomberg. And so, as the story began yesterday morning, while all this is going on, says Yogi Berra might say, this sounds like deja vu all over again. A little more than a week has passed since the Evergreen was successfully freed from a particularly narrow passage in Egypt's Suez Canal. Yet the canal is already struggling with another potential blockage on Tuesday. Shipping from Sharaf Group reported that traffic in the Suez has been halted after another tanker was stricken with engine trouble. Data from tankertrackers.com showed the blockage in the northbound lane, along with a handful of tugboats dispatched to aid the ship. Bloomberg identified the Italian tanker Rumford as the culprit and quoted the Sharaf shipping agency saying in a note to clients that the ship caused blocking for all vessels transiting the canal. The Suez Canal Authority took immediate action and tried to remove the vessel from channel using their tugs, said Sharaf, which helps manage traffic in the waterway. The tanker had a blackout whilst she was transiting the SC, Suez Canal, within the northbound convoy, the SCA said. The blockage started at 10:15 local time Tuesday. SCA tugs are now towing the vessel away from the passage to allow the flow of vessels convoys to resume, the agency said. SCA is towing the vessel with tugboats after the ship was handicapped, moving north the canal, according to the Inchcape Shipping Services. And here we see a tweet via Marine Traffic says there seems to be a slowdown of traffic at the Suez Canal again, as another ship, the #Rumford, is facing difficulties there. We are waiting on details, but as you can see from our playback video, tugs in the area rush to help the tanker. Let's see if this will play through. And of course, there we see it. It's going. These little green arrows. I'm sure you can probably barely see that there, but nonetheless, all of a sudden we see one of these decide to slow down here. Yeah, you get the idea. Bottom line, still the delay has caused a temporary disruption of traffic in the canal's northbound lane, as ship tracking services show. So the woes continue in the old Suez Canal. Interesting name, Minerva Nike. I wonder if there's anything to that. I did see some stuff kind of floating around on the old social media sites here, making some light about that. Not really sure what to quite make of that as of yet, but we'll stay on it. That being said, also kind of in the financial realm, Carnival, we may have no choice but to move cruise ships outside U.S. to resume operations. Now, mind you, if you remember, a little over a year ago when all this coronavirus stuff began, one of the first places we started to see these outbreaks actually take place was on the old cruise liners. And, of course, Carnival being one of them, and Carnival has basically been parked since. So following last month's CDC announcement that its new conditional sailing order barred cruise ships from departing the U.S. or sailing through its waters through November 1st, Carnival Cruise Line released a press release around 1400 Eastern Time Tuesday, saying it may have no other choice but to move its cruise ships outside U.S. home ports to resume operations. And of course, if you remember right here as well, there was a big flap on when all of these big-time trillion-dollar packages and that were being passed through Congress, the PPP loans and everything else that were going out around the same time, that all these handouts were going to all these various industries, and magically the cruise ship entertainment industry got left out, and so they felt quite slighted as part of that. Says Christine Duffy, president of Carnival Cruise Line, said, "While we have not made plans to move Carnival Cruise Line ships outside our U.S. home ports, we may have no choice but to do so in order to resume our operations, which have been on pause for over a year. We appreciate the continued patience and support from our loyal guests, travel advisors, and business partners as we work on a return-to-service solution." Duffy continued, says, "We know that this is very disappointing to our guests who continue to be eager to sail, and we remain committed to working with the administration and the CDC to find a workable solution that best serves the interest of public health. We are asking that the cruise industry be treated on par with the approach being taken on other travel and tourism sectors, as well as U.S. society at large." Carnival shares popped and dropped on the news. You can listen to the crew singing the goodbye song. Yeah, we're not going to spend too much time on that. But in the meantime, so much for the grand reopening of the cruise ship industry this year. Says at least baby boomers bought RVs where they can now travel across the country. And so yes, while the old cruise lines and that have been down, there's been a mad influx of folks actually buying up RVs across the country. So, that being said, shipping a little bit to what is going on in the Middle East. So, yesterday we find out Iranian IRGC cargo ship attacked in the Red Sea. According to report, the Zero Hedge equivalent of this article updated it and said that Israel may have been behind it with some mines and whatnot going on there. So, definitely tensions heating up in the Middle East between Israel, Iran. This has been ongoing for a little while. So this out of South Front yesterday, a cargo ship belonging to Iran's Revolutionary Guards was attacked in the Red Sea off the coast of Eritrea. This was reported by Al Arabiya TV, citing unnamed sources. It says Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency identified the ship as the Savez. The vessel Iran Savez has been stationed in the Red Sea for the past few years to support Iranian commandos sent on the commercial vessel anti-piracy escort missions, Tasnim News reported. Says Al Arabiya cited the sources as saying the vessel was attacked off the coast of Eritrea and was affiliated with Iran's Revolutionary Guards, but provided no evidence to support the assertion. According to the New York Times, an American official who spoke on condition of anonymity said that the Israelis had called the attack retaliation for earlier Iranian strikes on Israeli vessels, and that the Savez has been damaged below the waterline. The vessel's precise location in the Red Sea was not immediately clear. And I think the Zero Hedge equivalent of this article, if I'm recalling correctly, from yesterday, indicated that this particular ship, merchant vessel, apparently disguised as IRGC, whatever, According to similar like tankertracker.com, things of that nature, has not moved in like 6 months, something to that effect. So it was the latest in a reported series of attacks on Israeli and Iranian-owned cargo ships since late February, in which Tel Aviv and Tehran accused each other of responsibility. The incidents have occurred since U.S. President Joe Biden took office in January with a commitment to rejoin world powers' 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. Iran and the United States on April 6 launched indirect talks in Vienna that included the other powers on ways to revive the deal. Both Iran and the United States called the talks constructive. Earlier on April 6, before news broke about the attack, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in comments to lawmakers on his right-wing Likud party, said there should be no return to the dangerous nuclear accord, and added, in parallel, we must continue to fend off Iranian belligerents in our region, and this threat is no theoretical matter. I'm not uttering it rhetorically. We must take action in the face of the fanatical regime in Iran, which simply threatens to wipe us off the face of the earth. According to a U.S. intelligence report, Israel has targeted at least a dozen vessels bound for Syria and mostly carrying Iranian oil out of concern that petroleum profits are funding terrorism in the Middle East. Israel has also targeted several alleged Iranian convoys of weapons and military equipment going to Syria and Lebanon. So while all that is going on, then later in the day we get a report over to the South China Sea, where U.S. sails carrier into South China Sea as the Philippines enraged over China territory grab. And perhaps maybe in the last several days you may have seen reports of basically a floating flotilla of sorts, a great chain of boats and that establishing themselves in the South China Sea as if to kind of bully their way through down around the man-made islands net that China has put out there in the last several years. So this is going on. It says, in the latest dispute over territory in the South China Sea, the Philippine government is denouncing Beijing for sending a maritime militia near the contested Whitsun Reef, alternately spelled Whitsun Reef. There we go. It says China has responded by saying the ships are merely civilian fishing vessels, but the bellicose rhetoric has only grown between the two sides in the past days, and now, amid the ratcheting tensions, American warships led by the USS Theodore Roosevelt carrier have entered the waters. It says the U.S. Aircraft Carrier Strike Group reportedly entered the region starting Sunday, according to the South China Sea Probing Initiative. Perhaps feeling further emboldened by the U.S. strike group's presence, the Rodrigo Duterte government is livid, denouncing the Chinese vessel's presence using the strongest words yet, according to Reuters. And some of the strongest words yet from Duterte's camp about China's conduct in the South China Sea, his lawyer, Salvador Pinelo, called the prolonged presence of boats an unwelcome stain on relations that risked unwanted hostilities that both countries would rather not pursue. We can negotiate on matters of mutual concern and benefit, but make no mistake about it, our sovereignty is non-negotiable, Pinelo said in a statement. Duterte's spokesman, Harry Roque, echoed the view and told a news conference, "We will not give up even a single inch of our national territory or our exclusive economic zone, the EEZ. Whitsun Reef lies some 175 miles west of the Philippines province of Palawan. Manila believes China is using a massive presence of over 200 vessels to effectively establish control over the area, as we previously described last month. It says last month the Philippines lodged a diplomatic protest over what it charged is a swarming and threatening presence of Chinese vessels. And here we see a tweet out of the SCS Probing Initiative. Theodore Roosevelt enters the South China Sea via the Strait of Malacca this morning, according to AIS data on April 4th. And I'll show you a map here momentarily. But it says the United States, in the meantime, has vocally supported the Philippines' version of events, hence the latest carrier presence to warn off the Chinese. And that being said, here is the strike carrier group's positions here as of late. Yanked this one out of an article that came through this morning out of Rabobank and indicates the positions of most of our strike carrier groups out of the U.S. Navy. And of course, we see the CVN 68 Nimitz and that in whites. That one is still stationed in Washington. So we got a few on the coast here. We got the LHD-2. Don't know if I can necessarily read that on this map, but there we go. LHD-2. Where'd we go? Yeah, that one's based out of San Diego. That one's heading across the pond. We got the LHD-3 over here. Looks like over in the Indian Ocean. We got a few others that are coming around the bend over here as well. So, yeah, things definitely heating up. Obviously, if you're paying attention geopolitically, we got a lot of fronts in that where things are going on. If you look at it from the standpoint of Ukraine and Russia, NATO, all getting positioned over there. A lot of buildup that you're not hearing about by way of Russia over on that neck of the woods. Like I just stated, we got Iran, Israel, the little flap going on there. One might surmise that Turkey and Greece still got some things going on by way of some oil fields and that going on around the Aegean. Territorial disputes, Iran, India, China, and what's going on in the South China Sea, a little flap between China and Japan over territory, all in that same area. So things are ripe for the picking, certainly, and one might surmise with everything going on that are we on war footing? Perhaps. It looks like things have definitely picked up, but that being said, let me finish up with this last piece here and what's going on with the Evergreen. This came through on Sunday. The Evergiven is undergoing inspections, and I'm going to give a little extra color on this here at the end. It says, inspections have been taking place since March when Evergiven was finally freed thanks to a full moon and a huge lever. At least that was the claim. A high spring tide rose at noon and sharply ebbed over the next hours, acting as an invisible hand pushing on the upstream end of the vessel as the flotilla of tugs pulled from downstream. So there were no Red Sea God moments, according to the article giving glory to the moon. And of course you can read more there. Interesting article out of the Marshall Report here. And there have been some others in that might be a little bit questionable about the goings on there. Perhaps maybe you've seen that, I don't know. But a lot of unverified stuff, so I'm not going to touch upon that here this morning. But what is interesting, says this full moon, known as the worm moon, seems to be something to look into. Just saying it's a bit interesting considering the events. This year's full worm moon will reach peak illumination at 2:48 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Sunday, March 28, 2021. Its name marks the return of earthworms to the soil, one of the first signs of spring. Scientists disagree on whether March's full moon is a supermoon or not. A couple extra articles talking about the worm moon. It says, not that I'm superstitious or casting spells, but the cabal sure is. Or so they have such parties that oddly represent such things, from Super Bowl halftimes to CERN tunnel openings. They do it, not me, just saying. Once dislodged, the Evergiven was hauled by tugboats to Bitter Lake. They have been undergoing inspections. Suez Canal Authority, ship manager, and ship owner are also expected to conduct parallel investigations as they all pledge to cooperate with all authorities. So right now, there you can see the Evergiven, at least according to the map, is situated in what is known as Bitter Lake, awaiting these inspections. Satellite images show on April 1st, 3 days after the container ship was dislodged from the Suez Canal, it remains anchored in Bitter Lake. Its future route uncertain. It is now April 4th and still being inspected by authorities. Interesting. A spokesperson for Bernard Schulte Ship Management, the company that manages the Evergiven, told Insider the ship is due for a hull inspection and will remain in the Great Bitter Lake until it's completed. Evergreen said in a statement that the upcoming inspection, quote, will determine whether the ship can resume its scheduled service, end quote, to Rotterdam. And of course, red dots and green dots there. We see the activity going on in Bitter Lake there. It says investigations into the cause of the grounding have begun. The International Maritime Organization has received the ship's voyage data recorder, the ship's version of a black box, while the Suez Canal Authority is expected to begin its own investigation soon. Evergiven waiting in Suez Lake to see if it can still deliver cargo. That was out of Business Insider. From an article by Lloyd's List, it stated that 2 canal pilots were on board the vessel, which was 5th in the convoy transit at the time of the accident, according to the vessel's ship manager, which attributed the casualty to winds blowing Evergreen off course and was adamant there had been no mechanical or electrical failure. This conflicted with the Canal Authority's executive, who initially said that winds were not responsible. And I guess I'll pause there real quick and state that I had seen other reports as well that indicated that perhaps maybe engine failure might have been attributed to this as well. But perhaps that's still being refuted. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see what the quote-unquote official report is. Lloyd's List determined that winds at the time of the accident were about 30 knots, and navigation rules permitted a vessel this size to sail under such conditions. And here we see the freeing of the vessel at the time. It says Bernhard Schultz Ship Management, the ship's technical manager, as well as the Japanese-owned ship owners and the UK P&I Club, will also feed into this central investigation, as will the Suez Canal Authority. The UK P&I, United Kingdom Protection and Indemnity Insurance Club, insure cargo out of London. BSM will fully cooperate with all authorities in any investigations, a company spokesman told Lloyd's List. UK P&I said similar, with both declining to confirm whether their representative had reached the vessel. BSM declined to comment when asked whether or not there will be a crew change, and of course you can read more there out of Informa.com. Says the Egyptian team of the tugboat Mashour, pronounced Mashur, celebrates the success of freeing the Evergreen after it got stuck in the Suez Canal. And of course, I think we might have already covered that in episodes past. Says, so, as we continue into the matter, we shall see what is found and what happens to the ships in the north going south and in the south going north, especially with Russia in the north waters and the USA in the south waters. Or have they been sent into Bitter Lake to do inspections? And so very interesting things still checking out there. Wait to determine what exactly caused said stickiness in the old Suez Canal here. But the one thing that I find interesting out of this is the fact that this worm moon, right? All right, so look at it from this perspective, and here's where I'm going to go with this. Thinking of wormwood, the term used in the old Bible. How many places do you see the term wormwood? Well, let's look at this. So you got a worm moon. All right, we got an Evergreen named ship from Evergreen Shipping Company, Evergreen being a tree made of wood that is now sitting in Bitter Lake. Worm, wood, bitter. Interesting. So, what does old Revelation 8:11 say? The name of the star is called Wormwood. 1/3 of the waters became wormwood. Many people died from the waters because they were made bitter. That is Revelation 8:11. Now, perhaps, maybe one might surmise, maybe it doesn't necessarily fit that. Maybe one might look at Proverbs 5:4. But in the end, she is as bitter as wormwood and as sharp as a two-edged sword. Well, maybe it fits there, I don't know. But there's a couple other references in the Bible as well to the term wormwood. Jeremiah 9:15, Jeremiah 23:15, Lamentations 3:15, Lamentations 3:19, as well as Amos 5:7. Amos 5:7 says, "You who turn justice to wormwood and cast down righteousness to the earth." How do they fit? I don't know, but I find it very, very interesting, the confluence of events that took place with all the signaling and that we saw around the Evergreen, the H3RC call letters and that for the ship that happened to take place at the same time. We saw the Evergreen center fire up around Chappaqua, actually the county over, which just happened to be 33 minutes away from old Bill and Hillary's place, and just a lot of strange coincidences. And what have we heard about coincidences in the past? Well, I personally don't think that they are coincidences. So we'll have to see how this pans out, what shakes out of this. There have been reports that perhaps one of the floating ships and that, like the Mercy and that was stationed up in New York during the whole COVID business last year, may have gone over there. Perhaps some rescues have taken place. Again, this is all unconfirmed, so we're going to have to wait to see something a little bit more definitive, as a lot of that is hearsay at this point. But nonetheless, just a strange confluence of events for sure. So I'm going to keep an eye on it, and hopefully you guys will too. And that's what I've got here for the broadcast here this morning. Just a quick and dirty one. Like I said, get this one out of the way. And of course, you will be able to find me here a little bit later on this afternoon over on the 5x5 channel. We'll be firing up here in about another hour and a half or so. So you'll want to catch us over there, kicking off at about 3 p.m. Eastern. So that being said, appreciate you guys tuning in as always. And so we will see you back here a little bit later on this afternoon. Take care. God bless everybody.